Hi, and welcome to ArchTalk, a podcast presented by American Architecture. And I'm your host, Amrita Shah. As we approach closer to the time of the year where the larger AEC community gathers to share knowledge and create opportunities, we are joined by two insiders from the American Institute of Architects. Our first guest today is Stephen Martin, who is the Managing Director of Professional Development and Resources at AIA. And our second guest is Joe Chappell, who is the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Together, they'll be unveiling all the scoop of this year's conference. Welcome to our podcast, Stephen Martin and Joe Chappell.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Diving right into it, Joe, the first question that I have directed towards you would be, could you shed some light on the overarching theme or vision guiding the AIA 24 Design Conference this year?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we've really positioned AIA 24 as a celebration, if you will, a celebration of collaboration really across the professions of the built environment, so not just architecture. So while the conference does center on architecture and design, of course, being that we're AIA, we really do invite really all of the professions really spanning across the AEC industry. So really inviting all of those who collaborate in the design and building process. So that includes architects, it includes engineers, construction professionals and planners, landscape architects, interior designers, et cetera, et cetera. So this year, we actually did rebrand the conference. So we updated our name to the AIA Conference on Architecture and Design. So the addition of "and design," that was really intentional to really better reflect the spirit and the energy that we're looking to tap into at conference. So having said that, we don't have an overt theme per se, but we are always, each year we're working with a concept which helps us design the program. So I can share with you and our listeners a little bit about that concept this year. So we were really working with this idea of fusion. So a fusion of ideas, again, really tapping into this expanded positioning of conference, bringing in new voices, new ideas, with the idea that when you have that type of collaboration, it really leads to innovation. So we really like this idea of fusion. So you're going to see that really play out in the visual experience and direction of conference this year. In addition to that, we also worked with the idea of homecoming. So we're back in DC, super excited to be in DC again this year for the first time. It's been over a decade, I think. So back in DC, DC is, of course, the nation's capital, but it's also the headquarters for AIA. And during conference, we're really excited to unveil a preview of the new AIA Global Campus for Architecture and Design. So that will be through our tours. So we're doing hard hat tours to introduce attendees to what will become our new campus next year.
Very exciting. So another reason why this one is a special one.
Exactly.
That's great. So, Joe, kind of tying into this, what you just mentioned, I think what you identified this time, the idea of putting in design within the name itself, kind of opening it up to the design world and not just architects. I'm wondering if you can play into then tying into the selection of the keynote speakers. How does that reflect that sort of diversity that's going to be attending this conference? Does that play into that? What does that selection process look like within you guys in terms of picking? I know you guys just released one of them, Sanjay Gupta, which looks very exciting.
Yes.
But yeah, a little on that.
Sure. Yes. Happy to share some insights and an overview of our keynote. So again, really intentional in terms of selecting keynotes. So what we really try to do in terms of bringing keynotes to the stage for the general session at conference is really to, first and foremost, inspire our audience. So our point of view is, we don't have to have, architects, for example, on stage speaking to the audience. We're looking for inspiration from many different directions and looking for many different point of views. In terms of really convening that broader AEC audience to AIA 24, we were very intentional about who we selected. So you mentioned Dr. Sanjay Gupta. So this is breaking news. We just shared Gupta as one of our keynotes just late last week, and I can actually share who else we have lined up. So super excited about our series of keynotes this year. We have excellent speakers across the 4 days. So Dr. Sanjay Gupta, of course, is CNN's chief medical correspondent. So Dr. Gupta will be joining us on June 7th, and he'll be speaking on the intersections of public health and design. So, of course, Dr. Gupta has covered some of the most important health stories, if you will, of our time. He's a go-to authority on major developments in medicine and healthcare, and a go-to resource on general health for millions of people around the world. So we're really, really excited and grateful to have Dr. Gupta with us, sharing his visionary perspective on really how our world is going to be changing in the years ahead. We, of course, have climate change impacting public health. So Dr. Gupta will be speaking on the power of design innovations to help people live happier, healthier, safer lives to come. So very excited to have Dr. Gupta's expertise to give us that sort of future vision and really how, again, not just the architecture profession, but the AEC industry as a whole can really plan ahead and really prepare, our communities, our society to be healthier and to be safer. So in addition to Dr. Gupta, I'm really excited to share here first. So again, breaking news. We will also be joined by Academy Award-winning costume designer Ruth Carter. So Ruth Carter is most well known for her work on Marvel's blockbuster film Black Panther. She is going to be joining us to share her insights on storytelling and representation. So infusing storytelling and representation in design for a parallel industry, in this case, of course, costume design. So, Ruth Carter, she's a legend. She's a multiple Academy Award winner for her work in costume design. She won an Academy Award for design for Spike Lee's Malcolm X. She also won twice for Ryan Coogler's Black Panther Marvel films, both of those films. So her keynote will be taking place on June 8th. And again, we're so delighted to have her with us. So in addition to Ruth Carter and Dr. Gupta, we'll be joined by Arthur Brooks. So again, this is first time sharing this here on the podcast. So Arthur Brooks is a Harvard professor. He's also a world-renowned happiness expert. So his science is really the science of happiness. He's a New York Times bestselling author. Most recently, he co-authored a book with Oprah Winfrey. So it's titled The Life You Want. So Arthur Brooks will be kicking off our general session at AIA 24 on June 6th. So he'll be sharing, again, his expertise, cutting-edge science on how we can all, but again, those in the AEC profession especially, how we can take control of our well-being, our work-life balance, how we can better manage our office culture, and more. So his keynote will be followed by a book signing. So attendees will be available to purchase books on site from the AIA Design Shop and be sure to have their book signed by Arthur Brooks. In addition to those outstanding keynotes, we also have as our MC for the 3 days of our general session, Weizhi Zhang, who is the senior White House correspondent for CBS News. So we're delighted to have her as our host. In addition to those speakers, we have our fingers crossed for some surprise special guest appearances throughout AIA 24. So that's a summary. There's so much more I could say about those keynote speakers. We're absolutely delighted to have that series of keynotes for this year.
Joe, I'm just trying to hold a straight face and be all professional. This is all very exciting that you just released. I'm trying to kind of hold ground and go through that, but very, very exciting.
You feel
lineup.
The same way.
Yes. In fact, I think while I was going through your website and seeing the stuff, the tracks, everything, it's almost like you guys have made a conscious effort coming into a post-pandemic world where a lot of focus seems to be on mental health, bringing yourself to work, which is really exciting. And yeah, we're just waiting to attend that. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so just moving on, Stephen, I think this is where, again, you come in with the questions. So I really enjoyed the way the tracks were structured last year. It was a breeze to kind of go through it and maneuver through the apps with it. My question would be, what's the rationale behind kind of deciding what the tracks would be? How do you kind of make these subcategories? Is it going to be different this year in any way, if at all? How is it going to be different?
Sure. Well, and I'm glad that you found the tracks helpful, because that's why we do them. And it's the idea of putting things targeted together for what makes the most sense for attendees. Education is one of the primary reasons people come to the conference. It's great keynotes and great sessions and awesome networking, but then it's also the opportunity to learn with your peers, to learn from your peers, to hear experts in the field of architecture as well as people adjacent. There are a few changes to the tracks this year. We try to mix them up a little bit, and we learn from what worked well and what didn't work well. So this year we've got 7 tracks, very similar. We are focusing on AI technology and research. So we've got a track focused on that cutting edge piece. Clearly, AI this year is new as a track. If you had said, 18 months ago, AI, it probably would have been well, that's a neat thing in the future. But now you can't go anywhere without hearing about it. So we've got a track specifically focused with a lot of great sessions on AI. We have a track on career success, and that is really focused on the individual architect and things that you can do to enrich your career in the profession. Skill development, inclusive practices, equity, diversity, and inclusion in practice, things for our emerging professionals, those people who are on a path to licensure. A leadership track, and that's a little different from career success. The leadership track is really focused on building those leadership skills to guide firms and guide how architecture firms practice, looking at things like leadership development, developing good firm culture, firm transitions, succession planning. We have a change of the guard coming in some of our firms as some of architects get a little bit older, and they've established these great firms that they started as a sole proprietorship, and now they've built it up and they're reaching a point where they're saying, okay, I'm now ready to pass this on to the next generation. We don't have a lot out there in guidance on how to do that. And so we're providing some of those things in that leadership track. The winning work strategies track, just like it sounds like, is really about how can you keep your firm profitable. It's one of those places that we've heard from our members, we've heard from people in the design community. It's not a big topic when you go to architecture school. Architecture school is really about a lot of design. But in order to do great design, you also have to stay in business and you have to win the work and do the work. So that track's really focused on those tools to achieve your operational success, profitability, global practice expansion, things that for many of our architects and many of our members, it's not new to them, but it's a place where they really could use some reinforcement in looking at that next generation. Some of our other tracks come out of our own priorities and strategic priorities at AIA. So equity and inclusion is a strategic priority for the association. We know that we need to change some of the dynamics within the practice of architecture. There are lots of underrepresented groups that are really underrepresented in architecture, and we're looking at ways to make sure that we're reflecting the diversity of really everything around us in the practice of architecture. This isn't just focused, though, on how you make your firm more equitable. It's also things like how do you include thoughts about equity and diversity in design, in creating equitable communities, being sensitive to cultural issues or cultural changes, looking at well-being within spaces. So how do you design spaces that support health and well-being? It's great that we're going to have somebody who's going to talk about happiness, because that fits in. How we spend so much time inside buildings, they really do affect our mental well-being and our mental health. Climate action and net zero are also a priority for us strategically. And so we have a track devoted to sustainability issues, net zero energy design, carbon, captured carbon, and in basically all the realms of the circular economy built into how architects respond to environmental challenges. Really looking at emphasizing the need for sustainable and energy efficient design. We have a great commitment to the 2030 commitment, which is one of our pledges with AIA, and looking at creating basically a neutral or a carbon neutral design ethos throughout everything that we do. And then finally, it wouldn't be the Conference on Architecture and Design if there wasn't a track on exceptional design. And so that is looking at those things that are really the models that our members and other design professionals can look to as exemplars of good design based on the building typology. So if you're in healthcare design, there are courses about healthcare facilities. If you're in educational design or building educational facilities, there are going to be courses focused on designing the next generation of America's schools. Looking at some of the simple things, looking at residential architecture, healthcare facilities, public architecture, and what happens in the realm of public design. All of those things fall into that exceptional design track. So the idea for the tracks, just like you found with the app last year, hopefully you'll find that again this year, is it's a really quick way to kind of find exactly what you're looking for, and sort of pigeonhole when you look through and go, okay, I really need to find something on climate action, or I'm looking to learn more about what the circular economy is all about. That's where the tracks are helpful for that.
Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. In fact, because we kind of say we're a podcast that focuses on the business side. In fact, the two that you pointed out, the leadership track and the winning work track, I almost feel like we live in either pre-COVID world to post-COVID. Two pain points with leadership was, I think, much of the mentoring happens when you're in office, in person, informally, which became a void in the time we had the pandemic. Often that's an issue that came up in the podcast, but I'm so eager to attend the conference and hear solutions to that, because that is a pain point that exists. And similarly with finding work, I think the glooming fear of recession kind of is playing into how do we develop BD, how do we do business development? These are issues that come up. We're discussing it, none of us have solutions, and the conference sounds like an exciting time to be kind of dwelling into that. That's amazing, Stephen. That's really nice.
Yeah, we got some great proposals in both of those tracks, and I'm really excited by some of the names that we brought in, and some of the things that they'll be talking about. From simple practical application like how to effectively use social media to some of sort of the bigger picture things like what does it mean to have an inclusive firm? What does it mean to focus on work-life balance? And a lot of the issues that we're hearing within the practice itself, where people are starting to push back and say, how do I run a firm? How do I stay profitable without overworking my staff? And recognizing the fact that people have lives outside of the work they do, and this sort of putting a pin down that's saying the key to success is to work people 80, 90 hours a week. That's just not realistic anymore. And so exactly coming out of the pandemic, we've been forced in some ways to make some changes. Some things we've done really well, and we were able to pivot very quickly. In other places, we're learning from those experiences. And so our hope is that through those tracks, you're going to see the practical application of those best practices. So it's not just theory. What we really try to look for as we're doing our education program are those examples and those case studies. And so we don't just have people on stage who have written a book and they're going to talk to you about that, but maybe haven't actually done it. In the classroom setting, you're going to see more of that practitioner talking, so peer-to-peer education happening.
Very interesting. Stephen, my next question kind of ties into networking is, again, often the significant aspect of the conference. Could you tell us about the networking opportunities that AI24 has specifically designed, and whether there are any informal gatherings to facilitate connections within the conference itself?
Sure. Networking, I say when I look at the reviews, and because I'm responsible for continuing education and professional development, I'm very happy when I say that one of the main reasons people come to the conference is for education. Networking comes out almost as high. And that really is the reason. If you look at it, there are 3,000 plus providers of education out there. So why would you, if education's so important, you can find other places, but the real focus and the nice thing is to be able to get that education and have that opportunity to connect with your peers, to see people you haven't seen in a long time. So there are those opportunities that happen just in the hallways and in the interstitial spaces, the classroom settings. But there are actual events that are set up. So our knowledge communities have gatherings to bring together people of a like mind. So if you are interested in custom residential architecture, there is a forum for custom residential architecture. If you're involved in public architecture, we have a symposium that's taking place with public architectures and public architects to bring them together, and you can start to find your community. There are obviously the events that happen in the evenings. There are lots of social gatherings. We have the big party that takes place. Things that happen on the expo floor with things that happen within our booth spaces and opportunities to connect either at the AIA booth or in our activation zones on the expo floor. Joe, what are some of the other? There are a few more that I know I'm missing.
Yeah, so for first timers, if it's your first time to conference, we have a first timers orientation, which is really an opportunity to meet and network with peers who are also attending for the first time. We have a women's leadership luncheon. There's an LGBTQ plus happy hour. We have a next gen lounge where emerging professionals and students at the expo can participate in speed mentoring. They can get their headshots done for them. We have a student networking lunch. I think we mentioned the alumni meetups. We also have our AIA booth. So our AIA booth on the expo floor is a great opportunity to network with AIA staff and learn about AIA products and services. We'll also be having meetups for specific member groups in the AIA booth as well. But Stephen, as you mentioned, I mean, throughout the 4 days of conference, whether you're, at the convention center, you're on one of the tours, you're at a party, there's so many opportunities for informal networking in addition to those structured networking events we've scheduled.
That's great. In fact, I remember somebody cracking a joke last time that as soon as they landed the airport at SF or while moving towards the venue of the conference, people seemed to be wearing black clothes even more. So the networking started right at the airport because there's a horde of architects coming in, which was like the space is bustling with it. Thank you for sharing that information again. The next question, Stephen, would be in terms of the expo is essentially sort of like a masterclass for materials that happens within. But this time, the website speaks of 5 new experimental zones being introduced to that. Could you speak to us about that and how that would enhance the overall expo experience for attendees this year?
Sure. The floor, we've tried to divide it up into these different zones. And so it's things like build and imagine and innovate. And they have sort of themes behind them. And most of the vendors around those zones have something to do with those things. So like some of our cutting edge software things are in that innovate area. Each of those zones is anchored by an activation area that will either have a stage or a networking space or some other type of interactive space there. One of the things that we're doing a little differently this year as well is typically in the past, there's kind of been a line between AIA conference education and then the vendor provided expo education and sort of never the twain shall meet. This year, we're being better about integrating the two. So in addition to the traditional vendor-led programs that happen in learning lounges and in CE theaters on the expo floor during expo hours, there are also going to be some quick hit sessions, some 30-minute sessions that are the conference curated education happening in that expo space. Going back to the networking, there are also some activation things that will happen in those zones. So, we're hoping to see some vendors that maybe will be releasing new products while they're at the conference, some other people that will be hosting little meetups in those activation zones. But the idea, again, is to draw people in. It really is a great opportunity to interact with the building product manufacturers, the service vendors, and all those groups that do things. But it's not just a sales activity. It's an opportunity to engage, meet people who will be the good contacts that you need. We know that, when you specify products, knowing the ins and outs of that are so important. And so we know that most of our Expo presenters and vendors are really excited to be kind of part of the whole programming and not just sort of this, we have an Expo to take care of everything else. It really is an integral part of the whole conference experience.
That's amazing. That's amazing that that kind of conduence is happening this year, and see how it plays out. Stephen, my next question was, how can those who are kind of unable to attend in person, would they still be able to participate in the conference in the educational offerings that you guys have? Are there any platforms they'd be able to do that through?
So we don't this year have plans to do direct live streaming or anything like that. And some of that was a somewhat intentional decision. It is very difficult to do that well. And so you end up in situations where your in-person audience feels left out because the presenter is speaking only to the camera, or your online audience feels left out because the presenter has engaged with people in the room. Questions are asked that they don't hear, and so on. We are looking at, however, recording most of the sessions, at least audio-wise. And so we'll select from those. Our goal is to hopefully select from those a group of sessions that really went well, and either provide those recordings as a takeaway from the conference, or something that we can put onto our AIU platform, or identifying those sessions that were really good and really should be repeated again, and again making those available through our AIU platform. We have done that in the past. We've made certain sessions available. We found certain speakers along the way, but we are continuing to always look at evolving how the conference, how any of our programs can meet that sort of mixed environment. While we expect to have thousands of architects at the Conference on Architecture and Design, we have close to 100,000 members, and we know that we won't get 100,000 there, although we'd love it. But so we're always looking at ways that we can expand and extend the experience, not just to those who are in DC, but those who are wherever they are in the world, either, not necessarily real time, but at least close to real time, and providing ways to get them access to the resources, to the speakers, to many of the experiences that are part of the conference.
Okay. And really the next question is directed towards both of you. Here I'm trying to kind of extract certain tips out of you. So as a first-time attendee, the conference can be an overwhelming place because there's just so much happening. I think we can run it through you, Stephen, and then Joe later, or whichever order we want to go. But if there are certain, how would you guide them to explore the event so that they can maximize it? Is there a roadmap, a quick roadmap that you would suggest?
This will be my 10th conference with AIA. So
you were the one with the experience.
Well, yes, but I've always been staff, so I don't have. This is what I've gathered from the attendees that I've talked to, and I've heard from a lot of them about their positives and their negatives. I think I would start. I would definitely make a calendar of what I want to get to. And I would highlight those keynotes because, as you heard, I mean, those names are great names, and those are things that you're not going to want to miss. Then I think I'd use that app, and I'm glad that you found the app helpful, and hopefully that our attendees do. I'd use the app and start marking off and getting an idea of the programs that I want to attend. But I think the biggest thing I would say is be flexible. Oftentimes we get people that have set up a whole schedule for themselves. In fact, I've talked to a couple that by Thursday evening, the schedule's out the window because they just found something exciting over here, or they got into a conversation with someone over there, or they were riding the elevator in the hotel, and it just turned out that somebody speaking the next day was in the elevator with them, and they said, "Oh, I've got to change my schedule around and go to their session because that was a great conversation." So a lot of it is just, be ready to pivot on a moment's notice to go to something a little different or take a different track. I certainly would carve out time to spend on the expo floor. I think there's a great opportunity there to learn about new products, new developments, things you might not have heard about before. connect with those people that you need to in order to get the right specifications and the right things in place to do all that you have to do as part of the design process. And then enjoy the evening activities, go to the party, enjoy the nighttime activities, but make sure you do get some sleep in there because there's a whole lot coming the very next day. You get a chance to rest on Sunday when it's all over.
Yeah. Joe, would you like to chip in there?
Sure. I think flexibility. I think that's a great tip. There's so much going on, so I think just keeping it somewhat flexible is great advice. Yes, I mean, I mentioned the first timers orientation. I would really encourage those who are attending conference for the first time to really try to do that, to really orient themselves to the full experience. I would also ask for recommendations. So chat with other attendees, let them know you're attending for the first time, ask them what they've enjoyed most or what they would recommend. I would, to Stephen's point, really spend a substantial amount of time in the expo. There's so much to see, so many conversations there to be had. So I think those are all ones that I would put at the top of the list. I would really get out to the tours, or really try to do at least a couple of tours if it's your first time, to really see how the city where conference is taking place really plays a role in the experience, as well as the open studios to get out and visit other firms, other organizations. So those would be my recommendations.
And I'd add to that, since we're in DC and you have a chance to see the headquarters renovation, to make sure to pop over to 1735 New York and see that. There's also going to be a great exhibit at the Octagon House, the Octagon Museum, to talk, which is right there on site. And then just a practical thing, comfortable shoes. Because that's the worst thing, is to reach the end of that day and just have the sore feet. So comfortable shoes, because there is going to be a lot of movement through the expo floor, on the tours, and all the places that you're going.
Those were very, very useful tips. Thank you to both of you for sharing that. I'm keeping mental notes as well while we're doing this. So the last question that I kind of had towards you guys, if you could just remind us to some of the important dates to look out for the conferences in terms of, I know the advanced booking dates coming up, the apps coming up in May. So if those are some of the important dates so that our listeners kind of keep track of those coming in.
Yeah, I would just start with, if you're planning to attend, you've not registered, register, as soon as possible, because we do have graduated rates. So if you have an opportunity, try to register as soon as possible. I would also really look at the schedule and just start thinking about, what you would like to fit in while you're at conference. But to Stephen's point, to keep a flexible mindset while you're there. So those would be the two things that I would mention. Also, just, if you're planning to do some activities outside of conference, so for example, enjoying all of the restaurants that DC has to offer, our friends at AIA DC have compiled a really excellent list of recommended restaurants, which you can download from the conference website. So those would be some things that I would look out for and, plan to fit in over the next couple of weeks.
And I think for those who have been to the conference before, there may be this idea that the first day isn't really that important. We actually have programming that starts on that first Wednesday, and we start bright and early. So there is a full day of programming: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so as you're looking at your planning, I think you're going to find that there are things really throughout the conference that'll be worth attending. So getting there in time to start your day, to start early and not miss out on those things on Wednesday. We have some pre-conference, some symposiums that are taking place with our knowledge communities, some great activities for emerging professionals that are happening starting on that Wednesday.
You're making it harder for us to choose. We'll have to be probably kicking some workout already to be there all throughout the 3 days.
And one addition, if I may, so many of our tours are already starting to sell out. So would also really highly encourage really looking at the tour schedule and making sure if there's a tour you definitely want to make that you get registered for those tours.
Thank you. No, those were very important pointers that you guys kind of directed us towards. This is really, I think the buzz is out there, and I'm feeling the energy with everything you guys just shared. This was really exciting. I think both your energies is rubbing off on me and hopefully on all our listeners when they tune into this. I really appreciate you finding the time for doing this. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. We look forward to seeing you in June in DC.
Thank you.
We are definitely excited.